The rain over Boston wasn't gentle. It was a relentless, icy downpour that seemed to target anyone foolish enough to be outside. It was a city of gleaming towers and shadowed alleyways, and for Sofia, it was a world away from the humid, emerald embrace of her home in Puerto Viejo, Costa Rica. Her small, worn-out studio apartment felt more like a cage tonight. The single window rattled with each gust of wind, a constant reminder of her isolation. She pulled her thin sweater tighter, the wool scratchy against her skin. On her phone, a gallery of photos showed her daughter, Isabella's wide, 7-year-old smile, a sunbeam from another life. The weight of the distance, a physical ache in her chest, was heavier than any suitcase she'd carried. She was here for that smile, for the chance to give Isabella a future, working 2 backbreaking jobs as a cleaner that paid just enough for rent and the monthly money transfers back home. Her hands, raw and chapped from chemical cleaners, traced the photo. "Pronto, mi amor," she whispered into the silence, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Mommy will bring you here soon." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her boss at the office building. Sofia, we're cutting the night shift this week. Budgets. Don't come in. The words were a punch to her gut. No work meant a missed payment, a delay in the visa paperwork, another month without holding her daughter. A single hot tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek before she brushed it away with a furious swipe. Despair was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had to go out, to walk, to do something before the 4 walls closed in on her completely. She pulled on her worn-out sneakers, the soles thin against the cold floor, and stepped out into the punishing rain, the water soaking through her jacket almost instantly. The city lights blurred and swam through her tear-filled eyes. Sofia walked with no destination, her head bowed against the stinging rain. The streets were mostly deserted, a river of reflected neon and street lamp gold. She was about to turn back, defeated by the cold and her own thoughts, when a soft, pained sound cut through the drumming of the rain. It was a whimper, human and frail. Her head snapped up. There, huddled under the inadequate awning of a closed flower shop, was an elderly woman. She was drenched, her fine silver hair plastered to her scalp, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. She was clutching her chest, her face a mask of pale, clammy pain. "Are you okay? Señora, ¿está bien?" Sofia asked, rushing to her side without a second thought. The woman's eyes, a faded blue, were wide with fear. I can't catch my breath," she stammered, her voice thin as paper. Sofia's own problems vanished, replaced by a surge of protective instinct. This could be someone's abuela, someone's mother. She knelt, ignoring the cold water seeping through the knees of her jeans. "It's okay," Sofia said, her voice softening into a calm she didn't feel. "You're not alone. I'm here." She shrugged off her own damp jacket, despite her shivering, and draped it over the woman's trembling shoulders. The woman, who whispered her name was Eleanor, tried to protest, but Sofia was already dialing 911 on her precious, prepaid phone, her fingers numb and clumsy with cold. While they waited for the ambulance, Sofia held Eleanor's hand, rubbing it gently to generate warmth. She told her in a mix of broken English and soothing Spanish, "Help is coming. Just look at me. Breathe with me." She took slow, exaggerated breaths, her brown eyes locked on Eleanor's frightened blue ones, creating a tiny bubble of peace in the chaotic storm. The paramedics arrived with efficient, loud urgency, their red and blue lights painting the wet street in frantic strokes. As they loaded a now stabilized Eleanor into the ambulance, one of them turned to Sofia. "Are you family? You can ride with her." For a heartbeat, Sofia hesitated. The image of the text message, the lost wages, the visa fees, flashed in her mind. If she went to the hospital, she'd be out for hours, she'd get home exhausted, and she had to be at her other job at the hotel by 5 a.m. It was an impossible choice. But then she looked at Eleanor, whose eyes had found hers, filled with a silent, profound gratitude. This woman had no one. "See," Sofia said, her decision solidifying. "I will go." The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and fluorescent light. In the emergency room, a whirlwind of beeping machines and bustling nurses, Sofia became Eleanor's rock. She translated when the older woman's words failed her. She held her hand during a painful fore-insertion, and she filled out the endless forms with the little information she had. Hours slipped by. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. Each tick was a tiny hammer on Sophia's hope for sleep, for being functional at her next job. But seeing the color slowly return to Eleanor's cheeks, seeing her drift into a peaceful sleep, made the sacrifice feel insignificant. When a doctor finally confirmed Eleanor was stable and would be admitted for observation, a profound exhaustion settled over Sophia. She was drained, emotionally and physically. She gently tucked the thin hospital blanket around Eleanor's sleeping form, her touch as tender as if she were tucking in her own daughter. She left her phone number on a scrap of paper on the bedside table, scribbling Sophia underneath. Then, she walked out into the pre-dawn chill, her body aching, her heart somehow both heavy and light, to face the consequences of her kindness. The morning after the storm was deceptively bright, the sun gleaming off puddles as if the night's turmoil had never happened. For Sophia, the turmoil was just beginning. She had gotten only 2 hours of fitful sleep on her lumpy mattress before her alarm screamed, dragging her into a new day of exhaustion. Her body felt like lead, her eyes gritty and raw. She arrived at the grandiose hotel, her uniform stiff and uncomfortable, her mind in a fog. Her supervisor, a stern man named Mr. Davies, was waiting for her, arms crossed. "You're late, Rodriguez. And you look like you were dragged through a hedge backwards. This is a 5-star establishment. We have standards." Sophia tried to explain, her words stumbling over her fatigue and limited English. "There was an emergency. A woman sick. I had to help." Mr. Davies waved a dismissive hand. "I don't need stories. I need clean rooms. You're on probation. One more misstep and you're out." The words landed like a physical blow. The rest of her shift was a nightmare of aching muscles and suppressed panic. Cleaning the lavish suites, she saw remnants of other people's easy lives, discarded champagne flutes, designer shopping bags, a stark contrast to her own precarious existence. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. If she lost this job, she would lose everything. The dream of bringing Isabella here would shatter. The hope that had sustained her through 2 years of separation began to crumble. When her shift finally ended, she trudged back to her apartment, the sun now high and mocking. The emotional high of helping Eleanor had crashed, leaving only the bleak reality of her situation. She felt the walls of her life closing in, tighter and more suffocating than ever before. She was a single, invisible immigrant, carrying the weight of 2 worlds on her shoulders, and for the first time, she truly feared it might break her. Sophia spent the afternoon in a state of numb despair, curled on her bed, too drained even to cry. The 4 walls of her studio seemed to whisper her failures back to her. She was so deep in her own misery that the sound, when it came, made her jump. It was a knock. Not the tentative tap of a landlord, but a firm, confident rap on her door. Confusion cut through her fatigue. No one ever visited her. For a wild, hopeful second, she thought of Isabella, but that was impossible. She pushed herself up, her body protesting, and shuffled to the door, peering through the cheap peephole. The world outside distorted into a fisheye view, but the person standing in her dim hallway was unmistakable. It was Eleanor, the elderly woman she had helped last night. She looked transformed. Dressed in an elegant deep blue coat, her silver hair neatly styled, she stood with a quiet dignity, a small warm smile on her lips. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. Why was she here? How had she even found her? She had only left her first name and a phone number. With trembling fingers, Sophia unchained the door and pulled it open. The sight of Eleanor, healthy and radiant, standing in the doorway of her shabby apartment, was so surreal it stole her breath. "Eleanor? Señora? Are you all right?" She stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Eleanor's smile widened, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I am more than all right, my dear," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Thanks to you." She then gestured slightly behind her, down the hallway, a glint of something profound in her gaze. "I'm not here alone. There's someone who has been very, very eager to see you." Sophia's gaze followed Eleanor's gesture, her mind struggling to process the scene. The dimly lit hallway of her apartment building seemed to hold its breath. And then, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the stairwell. It was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with kind eyes and a nervous, hopeful expression. She was holding the hand of a small child who was half hiding behind her legs. Sophia's eyes dropped to the little girl. She had dark, curly hair pulled into two messy pigtails, and was clutching a worn-out stuffed sloth. Time stopped. The air left Sophia's lungs in a painful rush. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Those eyes. That nose. It was a face she kissed every night in her dreams. Isabella. The name was a broken prayer on her lips. The little girl peeked out from behind the woman's legs, her big, brown eyes, identical to Sophia's, widening in recognition. "Mommy," she whispered, the sound small and uncertain. Then, louder, "Mommy." In an instant, the world shattered and reformed. Isabella let go of the woman's hand and launched herself forward, a tiny rocket of pure joy, barreling into Sophia's legs. Sophia collapsed to her knees, not feeling the impact of the hard floor, and wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her into her embrace so tight it felt like their souls were stitching back together. She buried her face in Isabella's hair, inhaling the scent of her, a smell of home and sunshine, and everything she had been missing. She was sobbing now, great, heaving sobs of 2 years of pent-up longing, of fear, of desperate hope. "Mi bibi, mi vida, mi corazón," she choked out, raining kisses all over her daughter's face. Isabella was crying too, clinging to her mother's neck, repeating, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," like a mantra. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated magic, a seismic shift in the universe, right there on the cold linoleum of a dusty hallway. How long they stayed like that, tangled together on the floor, Sophia didn't know. The world had narrowed to the feel of her daughter's heartbeat against her own. It was Eleanor's gentle voice, thick with emotion, that finally broke through their bubble. She talked of nothing else on the plane ride here. Sophia looked up, her vision blurred by tears, to see Eleanor and the young woman watching them, their own eyes shining. Still holding Isabella tightly in her arms, as if she might vanish, Sophia managed to stand, her legs weak. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "How is this possible?" The young woman, who introduced herself as Clara, Eleanor's personal assistant, stepped forward. "It was the note you left, Sophia. With your name and phone number. When Eleanor was feeling better this morning, she asked me to find you. She wanted to thank you properly." Clara explained how a simple online search, using Sophia's name and the area, had quickly led them to the immigration advocacy group that had been helping Sophia with her case. A single, discreet call from Eleanor's office to the group's director had revealed the whole story. Sophia's tireless work, her sole purpose to reunite with her daughter, the agonizing delays and financial hurdles. "Eleanor heard all this," Clara continued, her voice soft with awe. "And she made one more call. To a friend at the U.S. Embassy in San Jose." Sophia listened, her mind reeling. She held Isabella closer, feeling the solid, real weight of her. Eleanor reached out and placed a delicate, age-spotted hand on Sophia's arm. "You saved my life, Sophia. In more ways than one. You gave me the gift of more time," she said, her gaze unwavering. "It seemed only right that I should help give you the gift of yours. The rest of it with your daughter." The reality of it finally crashed over Sophia. This wasn't a dream. This was a miracle, orchestrated by the very woman whose life she had saved. The kindness she had offered in the rain had returned to her 1,000-fold, not as money, but as the one thing money couldn't truly buy. Her heart, whole again. The following hours were a whirlwind of tears, laughter, and disbelieving joy. Sophia's small apartment, once a symbol of her loneliness, was now filled with a light it had never known. Isabella explored every inch of the studio, chattering non-stop in a mix of Spanish and excited giggles, pointing at the photos of herself on the wall, as if seeing them for the first time. Eleanor and Clara stayed for a while, sharing a simple meal of takeout food that tasted like a feast. Sophia learned that Eleanor was a retired philanthropist, a woman of quiet but immense influence who had lost her own husband years ago and had no children of her own. The world can be a cold place, Sophia, Eleanor said, sipping a cup of tea. But you reminded me that its warmth lies in the compassion of strangers. You saw me not as a problem, but as a person. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Eleanor prepared to leave. But before she did, she handed Sophia a simple, cream-colored envelope. "This isn't payment," she said firmly, seeing the protest forming in Sophia's eyes. "A life saved cannot be paid for. This is an investment. In a mother's love, and in a little girl's future." After they left, the apartment fell into a peaceful, contented quiet. Isabella was fast asleep on Sophia's bed, her stuffed sloth tucked under her arm, her breathing deep and even. Sophia sat beside her, the unopened envelope in her hand. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside was not a check, but a letter from a prestigious non-profit legal foundation, stating that they would be taking over her immigration case pro bono to secure her permanent status. Paperclipped to it was a grant certificate, a sum of money that made Sophia's head spin, enough to cover years of rent, to put Isabella in a good school, to breathe without the constant stranglehold of fear. She looked from the papers to her sleeping daughter, and a sob of pure, unburdened relief escaped her. It was over. The struggle, the fear, the endless waiting. A new chapter was beginning. Weeks turned into months. Sophia's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. With the legal foundation's help, her paperwork was fast-tracked. The financial grant allowed her to quit one of her jobs and enroll in English and business classes, rekindling her old dream of starting a small Costa Rican catering company. She and Isabella moved into a bright, two-bedroom apartment with a real window that looked out onto a park where Isabella loved to play. The shadow of desperation that had once lived in Sophia's eyes was gone, replaced by a calm, steady light. She and Eleanor developed a deep, genuine friendship. They shared weekly lunches, where Eleanor would delight in Isabella's stories, and Sophia would practice her English. It was during one of these lunches that Eleanor shared her own full story. She revealed that the night Sophia found her, she had been on her way home from a memorial service for her late husband. The grief and the cold had triggered a latent heart condition. "I truly believed in that moment on the street that my time had come," Eleanor said, her voice soft. "And then an angel with a Costa Rican accent and the kindest eyes I have ever seen appeared out of the rain. You didn't just save my life, Sophia. You gave it new meaning." Sophia reached across the table and took her friend's hand. They were an unlikely pair, the wealthy, elderly Boston socialite and the young immigrant mother, but their bond, forged in a moment of ultimate vulnerability, was unbreakable. They were a living testament to the fact that family isn't always about blood. It's about the threads of kindness we choose to weave into our lives, creating a tapestry far more beautiful and resilient than anyone could plan. A year later, on a crisp autumn day that smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves, Sophia stood in the kitchen of her own small, but thriving catering business, Sabor de mi Corazón, flavor of my heart. She was preparing a special order for a charity gala, hosted by the Eleanor Vance Foundation, which now included a new scholarship program for immigrant mothers. The air was rich with the scent of fried plantains, black beans, and cilantro. From the adjoining play area, she could hear Isabella's laughter as she played with friends after school. Her English now fluent, peppered with the Spanish lullabies her mother still sang to her every night. Sophia paused, wiping her hands on her apron, and watched her daughter. Isabella's smile was the same sunbeam from the photos, but now it was here, in the same room, real and vibrant. There were no more monthly money transfers, only college savings. No more frantic calls to lawyers, only plans for the future. The door chimed as Eleanor walked in, bringing a gust of cool air and her warm, familiar presence. "Something smells divine," she declared, kissing Sophia on the cheek and waving at Isabella. Sophia smiled, a deep, contented smile that reached her eyes. She looked around her kitchen, at her daughter, at her friend. The journey had been longer and harder than she ever anticipated, marked by cold rain and hot tears. But it had led her here. Not just to a new country, but to a new life. Not just to safety, but to belonging. She had come to America searching for a dream for her daughter, and in the process, through an act of simple human kindness, she had found a family, a purpose and finally, a place where her heart was truly, completely at home. The story that began with a desperate woman in a storm had found its beautiful, satisfying, and transformative end.